Hello, my name is Rich Howard, owner of Architectural Builder Supply. This video is to bring you a closer look at the Bommer number 3023-4-633. This is a spring-loaded hinge, is what it is. It's a little bit of an unusual hinge, and we'll go over that right now. So what we're dealing with is a Bommer 3023 hinge. So the Bommer 3020 series is one of their series. It's probably their primary series of double-acting spring hinges. And the ubiquitous one is the 3029. That's just a double-acting spring hinge, you know, attached to the jamb, attached to the style of the door, double-acting. If you've been in a restaurant and they've got a double-acting door between the kitchen and the front of house, probably Bommer is the bottom line. Cloned, copied, generally by very inferior attempts of that platform, invented by Bommer, the two brothers Bommer from 1876, owned, generally created the entire field of spring closing pieces of hardware for door use. And this 3023 is an example of that. Now, what makes this a little bit unusual in the sense that, you know, why isn't it not a 3029? Because it's half surface. That's the only thing that differentiates this. So half surface, there are terms full surface, full mortise, half surface, half mortise. When you're dealing with half surface, half mortise, they're referring to the leaf on the door, not the leaf on the frame. What's the leaf doing on the door? If it's a half surface hinge, that leaf that's mounted to the door is surface mounted versus a half mortise. In that scenario, the leaf on the door has to be mortised because it's a half mortise hinge. And it's understood that the other leaf is the other way. So in a half surface hinge, you would have the leaf to the jamb mortised to the jamb, or surface mounted in this case. And the opposite leaf is that active word. In a half mortise hinge, you would have a hinged mortise to the edge of the door and then surface mounted to the frame. Where you see those, and I don't think Bommer has any half mortise spring hinges. Pretty sure they don't. Where you would see that is when you're installing hollow metal doors into a channel iron frame. You'll attach that leaf to the preparation in the edge of the hollow metal door as you normally would, but then you'll surface mount that to the face of the channel iron, drill and tap or weld, whatever the case might be. This is half surface. Why would you want half surface? I can't say in particular why you would want it, except that you're not going to have the leaf over in this area, and the door would sit in here and you would screw to the edge of the door. In this case, the door is going to sit here and you're going to screw to the face of the door, is how that's going to be. Okay. Why this client wanted half surface over standard 3029 could be a clearance problem. They may not literally be able to change the size of the doors, and they can't mortise into the edge of the door. And when you bring that leaf over here, now you've got a specific amount of allowance that you have to build into the formula in the width of the door. So it's possible that they had a fixed rough opening, they have a fixed door width, and they can't change that, and they've discovered that the half surface will allow them to get that door installed in its native width in the native rough opening. Just an idea. Or maybe this allows them to mortise it to a point where, you know, they can still mortise it. The 3029 would, it potentially requires a smaller prefit size. So that's what a half surface hinge is. Okay, the other leaf is going to go to the frame normally. Now this is a 3023 half surface. It has these typical button tips. It's a -4. Well, really nowhere on here are you thinking, well, it's a 4-inch, I need a 4-inch. You can find, of course, 4-inch on this hinge if you look long and hard enough. It's really that height of that assembly. But that doesn't really tell us anything important about the hinge in terms of whether or not it's going to work for our application. The height of the hinge in the world of Bommer relates to the door thickness. So if it's a -4, that's telling me that the door thickness is probably from, I'm guessing, I forget, 1 1/8, maybe to about 1 3/8, in that range. Okay. If your door is 1 3/4, this is the wrong hinge. If it's you would not want a 6-inch. If your door is 1.5 inches, you could make a 5-inch work, but probably not the 4-inch. That's what that means. Now the 633 means two things. It means it's made of steel. Also that it is in a satin brass finish, as you can see. Okay. This client ordered one each hinge, just one hinge. They are priced and sold per hinge. I would think you'd need at least 2, possibly 3 on a door. Why one is being ordered, I can only imagine that they are replacing one that has become broken, damaged, vandalized, lost. Doors come down for paint. Hinges get taken off, swept up at the end of the night, in the garbage, early the next morning, out to the dumpster. Now, and then about the finishes. Any finish that Bommer can do on steel, they can do on this hinge. Your brasses, your bronze, your chromes, your nickels, satin, polish. They can do oil rubbed. They can do bright black japanned. They can do zinc plated as well. If you're looking for an inexpensive chrome type finish, a 603 finish would be good. That's zinc plating. It is not going to have the brushed uniform look of a satin chrome, but it will also be noticeably less expensive. Let's switch to the screen view and take a closer look at some supporting documentation. So here is the hinge that we are indeed looking at. Looks a little odd to have the hinge folded out like this. And admittedly, I don't believe. Well, no, it could be. Yeah, that could be a half surface hinge if you're looking. No, it's not. This stock image is not a half surface hinge. Regardless, we're looking at a half surface hinge. By the time you're seeing this video, there'll probably be loads of images posted down below. So we are dealing with a half surface hinge. It's non-template. The link here to the document called template shows us the location of the holes for the screws. That means that this is a non-template pattern, meaning the screws do not adhere to any sort of industry-established standard for the placement of holes for hinges. So that's why they call it non-template. Non-handed. It could also be used on the left side of the opening or the right side of the opening. It's double acting. Door thickness, I was relatively close, but this will go down to 7/8 up to 1.25 inches, and that's your 4-inch size. Minimum door height, 80-inch. What they're telling you there is if you're going to put a couple of these on a 30-inch tall door, it's likely way too much spring for your application. So they're testing this on a full-size door, a 6'8" door. Maximum weight for 2 hinges, 60 pounds, 75 for 3 hinges. Maximum width, 28-inch or 3 foot, depending on the quantity of hinges. Door flange is surface applied to the face of the door. We discussed half surface. Jamb flange is surface applied to the jamb. That means that to the cased opening frame, you're not mortising that out. You're attaching that right to the face of the cased opening frame. Do not use on doors with a beveled hinge edge. That is really important. I've had people call me and say that their door doesn't self-center correctly. The issue is you've got, your jamb leaf here, then you've got your hinge leaf here, okay, that and your door sits in here. What I'm driving at is if you have a beveled edge door, that door is going to sit. It's really going to sit, like that in the opening. So your hinge style has to be square. You don't want it beveled. You simply want it square edged is what you want. I've had people call and say, I've got 2 doors and they don't center very well. And it's because after we discussed all of the possibilities of what could have been happening, it was determined that they had, a situation where they had beveled edges on the sides. And before we got to that conclusion that the doors were not on a center line, we talked about the jambs maybe being twisted. The jambs, maybe being not square. Maybe they were twisted. maybe the client needed to shim the hinges to pull that door down over this way. And then at the end, because I didn't ask the question initially, it subconsciously it didn't occur to me to ask, because I think subconsciously it was clear that you would have to have a square edge hinge. I finally said, where did you get the doors? Well, I got them from the Home Depot lumberyard. Okay, were they pre-fit? Oh yeah, I didn't have to cut them down at all. Were they beveled? Yep. And then it occurred to the client, oh, okay, that's the problem. So yeah, you need to use a square edge door on these. Packed with all wood screws, that's true. I'll show those to you in a moment. Permits doors to open in either direction and automatically return to the closed position. That's inherently what this is. And it's adjustable spring tension. No hanging strip is needed. Now, a hanging strip is nothing other than when you have a jam. There are manufacturers who make double-acting hinges. In fact, they're a copy of Bommer, or they're a new take on their patent, where you have to apply a piece of wood to the jam. Okay, that's called a hanging strip, so that you can get your hinge applied. Bommer's hinges do not require that piece of equipment attached to the frame. If you wanted to replace the tension pin, the link is here. And by the time you're seeing this video, the tension rod will also be listed there as well. It's not uncommon that people need to buy tension pins. They get lost, things of that nature. Very occasionally, someone makes a claim that Bommer did not send an adequate quantity. That is, in 30 years, that may have been true once. Bommer does an exceptional job to make sure you get the proper quantity of tension pins. Now, these links down below, the template we've already touched on. Let's touch on it again. So they're really giving you an idea of where those holes are. Also what it looks like in cross-section. Okay? So the important thing about this is you know what you have to allow for a margin on that side. There's no realistic way to decrease that, but by maybe, 45 thousandths, I would say. You might mortise that edge of that door so slightly that you could get that down to 5/32, but it's never going to be less than that realistically. So you've got to allow that sort of room. Speaking of allowing room, we have to talk about what are you planning on doing about okay, sorry for the crude drawing. Okay, so we know over here we're going to have 3.182, or whatever it is, 3/16. What are we doing here? So what we're doing here is going to be based on, is that square edged, or have you decided to radius that over? If you radius it over, you'll be able to bring that down to 1/8 of an inch for sure. You might just automatically want to make it 3/16 so it matches this side, and at that point, I don't believe you'll have to do anything to the edge of the door in terms of radiusing it over or rounding it over. Just putting a round over, a small round over on either side. You might need to, depending on the actual fit. But because your door is maximum 1.25 inches, if you did 3/16 here as you do here, I think it's going to fit just fine. And again, if you radius the door over, if you radius the entire edge, you'll be able to get that down to well below 3/16. But when you're looking at the door in elevation, it's really not going to look the same on both sides. And will you notice that? Probably not, but you'll be aware of it because you did the installation. You want that margin and that margin to probably be fairly balanced, and probably balance it up here as well. Speaking of the height, you're going to need to leave a margin up here. What you do at the floor will be based on your flooring. What you do for the undercut will be based on your floor condition sort of situation. So that document is handy because it shows us some information. Technical specs, let's look at that first. Let's see. Installation instructions. Okay. Yeah, basically the same sort of stuff. Let's do installation instructions first. Generic document. What they're saying is, the takeaway here is, if you are doing 3 hinges on a door, which you very likely will be, put 2 at the top. Just soldier stack them like this. 70% of the weight of the door is actually hung on that top hinge. So you're going to need more spring power up here just because it's going to help keep the door up rather than it sag down. Okay? And down here is what the bottom hinge is going to look like. Now, that link to technical specifications, that's the document that's included. It's really installation instructions is what it is. So we zoom in on that a little bit, and you'll see the outline of what that's supposed to look like. And what they're talking about here is really setting tension on the material. And I'll demonstrate that on camera. But the bottom line is when the tension collar is pointed towards the top of the door, this is the tension collar. There isn't one at this end. When that's towards the top, to increase the tension, you'll rotate the tension rod clockwise, and that's how you'll set tension. If you're going to 90 degree only, I think you should be able to go to 4 holes of tension. But if you're going to go much past that, which you really can't, in most applications, you might want to restrict that. Oh, sorry, let's back up. Don't exceed 5 holes, right there. If you're going past 90 degree, you might want to restrict that to 4 holes. Okay. And again, showing you what they want it to look like. If you're doing pairs of doors, you'll want to put one side with the tension collar pointed towards the floor. They find that alignment of the 2 doors is better served when you have that sort of application put together. I take that to mean that the hinge has an inherent bias, and that when you reverse one of them, it biases so that it is flush with each other. Okay. Not much to say here, except, your rough opening, or pardon me, your finished opening, you have to calculate that. It's easy. Whatever your finished opening is, deduct 3/16 here, and let's just say, if it's a pair of doors, 3/16, maybe a 1/4 inch, 3/16 here, and divide it by 2. If it's a single door, the same logic, just don't divide anything at all. Okay, so pretty simple and straightforward. Let's move back to the camera view and demonstrate the setting of tension. Now, for every order that you place, you'll get at least 1 tension rod. Okay, just a piece of steel. For every hinge that you order, you'll get 2 tension pins. This design requires 2 tension pins. So, as the instructions said, and there are these directional arrows here and here, they tell you what direction to rotate in. That means it doesn't matter if the tension collar is down or up. Just follow the direction of arrow. But when you are in the position where the tension collar is pointed towards the top, fold that back so you can see this better. You'll rotate it clockwise. So as I do so, you see that I reveal new additional holes, and it's into one of those new holes that you'll drop the tension pin, and then you'll continue to crank that over as necessary. I would probably just set, when I get the hinge applied, and I've got the door in the opening and shimmed completely, I'll bring that hinge leaf over. Mark my holes, attach it, set my tension, then remove the shims, and then test. I'd probably put 4 holes on each of them just to begin with. If it's moving too quick, reduce a hole of tension. But you have to be mindful. What's making the door close is the stored tension on the spring. What's holding the door up is the stored tension on the spring. So as you release tension on the spring, that door could have a tendency to come into the opening. Okay, so when you reduce tension and check it, remember the door is just not pivoting on a fixed axis because the weight of the door is going to pull it out of the opening. So you're going to be going actually in a more oval sort of fashion. So be mindful of that. You don't want to have the door crash on the strike jam and damage it. Nice and slow. If the door is hanging out, you'll have to go back to that tension. And then again, like they said, 5 holes of tension. Don't exceed. There are your screws that I mentioned earlier in a complementary finish. Installation instructions, they're the same document that we just literally went over. They're just scanned and uploaded. A little cleaner version here, though. But Drawn 2004, the one online, yeah, June of 2004. So this hardware doesn't change often, that's to be sure. Okay, fun fact about Bommer. They have two facilities. One is their manufacturing plant. The other is their plating facility, where they plate all the product. Why is that interesting? Well, because it's cool. They can do over 30 finishes on brass, bronze, stainless, steel-based product. The interesting thing about their plating plant is that it is an incredibly clean operation for the otherwise dirty, filthy, dangerous, potentially toxic sort of process that's done when you're plating metals. The fun fact about Bommer is the water that they eject from the plating plant is cleaner than the municipal water supply, and the municipal water supply is completely perfectly healthy for human consumption. What I'm driving at is that Bommer runs an incredibly clean plating plant. Another fun fact. The Bommer logo says "Made in USA" and right above it. That's a fact that Bommer is quite proud of, as am I to represent them. 100% domestic manufactured. That may or may not be of concern, interest to you whatsoever, but I supply that information so that you have it as well. Any questions on the Bommer 3023 in a 4-inch size and a 633 finish, or any other Bommer product, please feel free to reach out to us. And thank you. If you've enjoyed this video, please click thumbs up. Please click subscribe as well, and even share the video with someone that you know. And if you have any questions for a future video, please send them our way and we will make every attempt to oblige. And thank you very much.